You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron, and a happy Tuesday to you all. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and with Week 9 in the books, coming off the heels of an exciting Monday Night Football matchup where the Chiefs took down the Buccaneers to advance to 8-0, we've got plenty to look at. We're ranking all 32 teams through my tier list, worst to first. Rankings up on the screen right now are last week's rankings, so make sure you comment down below. Let me know your thoughts as we work our way through, but we'll go ahead and reset the list here, starting from the bottom. Like I said, working our way up to the top. We begin first with the number 1 overall selection category, those contenders looking to pick at number 1, and at 32, I have the New Orleans Saints sitting at the very bottom here. The Patriots right above them at 31, Panthers at 30, the Raiders at 29, Titans at 28, and the Jaguars round out the category at number 27 here. So the Patriots technically have the number 1 overall pick right now due to strength of schedule, with a bunch of teams now sitting at 2-7 or just 2 wins in general. But the Saints, in the current state that they are, in my opinion, feel like they are set for a complete and just like it's a collapse, but kind of a needed one here. The big thing that everyone took away, and shout out to, I got this from the 33rd team, so I will give a shout out to them on this one here. For the stat pull on this one, the Saints became the first team to win the turnover battle, have a total yard margin of plus 150, have over 150 rushing yards, and lose since 2003. First team to do so. Every other team in this category was 354 and 0. They are the only team with that stat line to have lost, which is crazy. And that resulted in the firing of head coach Dennis Allen. And I think this is good, not because I, obviously never wish anyone to get fired, but it allows the Saints to finally and completely turn the page and move on from the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era of the Saints. I feel like that's something that's kind of been well overdue in New Orleans now, and it's been trending in this direction for quite some time. Ever since the 2-0 start, the wagon has just kind of fallen apart in New Orleans, a lot of it dealing with injuries, but also some other issues on top of that. This will allow, with Dennis Allen being the defensive coordinator of Sean Payton for a duration of that time, to allow this team to really go through that full reset this offseason. And I feel like right now, the Saints are kind of on the fast track to that point. At 31 with the Patriots, also sitting at 2-7, Drake May is basically the lone bright spot on the offensive side of things. And then you have Christian Gonzalez on the defensive side of things, who is, I don't want to say the lone bright spot, but he is what shines brightest on the defensive side of things right now. Really tough contest. You go and you have the opportunity with the clock at 0, game-tying prayer of a throw from Drake May that finds its way into Ramondre Stevenson's hands, and you have a shot to steal a victory you probably shouldn't even have the potential of stealing right now. And Gerard Mayo opts to go and just kick the PAT, and you lose in overtime as the Titans ground and pound their way to victory. I wish that the Patriots went for 2 here. There is no love lost if you end up failing the 2-point conversion. You're not playing for much this season anyways, but at least give your quarterback the opportunity to win that football game after that miracle drive-ending touchdown. That's where I stand there. It's not like the biggest of deals in, the grand scheme of the Patriots this season, but I would have loved to see just a little bit of aggression there. Like, what do you have to lose realistically other than just losing the football game? Go after it. You're in a position you probably shouldn't have been in. You got a very extremely lucky touchdown, and you could have stolen the game with that 2-point conversion. I wish they would have went for it. It is what it is. They're at 2-7 now, sitting at the bottom or near the bottom of the barrel. Panthers at number 30, not a pretty win, but a win is a win. I will say, though, in that win, you do still kind of lose here because the Panthers should be fighting for that number 1 overall selection more so than anything. But I will tip my cap to the Panthers for getting the win here because I think a lot of people, myself included, had the Saints pulling out that game and getting a victory there. As we mentioned previously, they lost in all those stats, and still, on top of that, there was more. They also had fewer first downs than the Saints did in this win. They also had far fewer time of possession by nearly, I think, 10 minutes was the difference there. Bryce Young is under center. It's not pretty, but it looks like he's stolen the job back from Andy Dalton here. I guess we'll just see how the Panthers kind of ride this one out, but the Panthers are in quite a way right now, and honestly, you could argue that maybe they do belong lower than either the Saints or the Patriots right now, but I did want to give them a slight bump and a little bit of credit for getting the job done and winning a football game that a lot of people pinned them to lose. The Raiders at 29, offense scoring about 10 points essentially in that game, plus a garbage time touchdown in the final minute to give them the 17 points. Obviously, Jack Jones accounting for 7 of the 24 that they put up on the day. The offense did not look great. They've been struggling to run the football all season right now. The quarterback situation is not ideal. Obviously, you have Desmond Ridder coming in the fourth quarter playing as well. But the defense allowing 5 touchdowns to Joe Burrow in this game here. And on top of that, you let a Bengals team that hasn't had a ton of success running the football as of late have a pretty strong day with Chase Brown as well. And somehow only your offensive coaches were fired. I don't really know what's going on in Las Vegas right now. This is another team that feels like it's on the fast track to some serious changes at the end of the season here. I just found it interesting that, yes, the offensive struggles were there, don't get me wrong, and the Bengals defense hasn't necessarily been like world beaters by any means to this point, but I'm a little bit surprised to only see offensive coaches being fired after your defense allows 5 touchdowns. And I get it's Joe Burrow, but it's not like that's the best game that the Bengals have had offensively this season, and it was against you. So just interesting to me that only the offense really caught a lot of the flack for that loss there. Interesting stuff, to say the least. The Titans at 28, Tony Pollard, big game for him, 28 carries, 128 yards. He was averaging 4.6 yards per attempt. The offensive line pummeling the Patriots in the trenches up front, especially in that overtime effort there. You could tell the Patriots were gassed, and the Titans were just rolling with momentum. And it's not like Tony Pollard is some ground and pound back. Like he's not like a Derrick Henry-esque kind of guy, and no one really is, but you get what I'm saying. And for him to be just going in, it felt like down after down, just bulldozing through the Patriots defense that just felt like they were out of gas. I give some major credit to the Titans on this one here. And honestly, we also have to sit here and think, like, between not only that effort and you look at Mason Rudolph and what he was able to do in the game, I mean, overall, a pretty solid performance. Yeah, you probably maybe left some points on the table, but ultimately you got the job done. And in a battle of, who wants the worst draft pick more, you ended up not winning that battle. And it's not a bad battle to lose. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, the defense. Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, just that defensive front, Arden Key, and even Jack Gibbons, the linebacker. So much just unrelenting effort on the defensive side of things, giving the Patriots a lot of problems. This is a defense that looks pretty good on the defensive line, and is no joke in my opinion. There's a lot of other issues to look at, but up front, Titans look pretty strong. And then the Jaguars rounding out the group at 2-7 as well at number 27 here. As of this recording, which I am recording right now at 12:53 a.m., and you are all seeing this anytime after like 6 a.m. this next morning here, Doug Peterson still has a job. And I'm curious to see if that changes over the next few days here. I would have expected maybe it would have already happened on Monday if he was going to be losing his job. But maybe, you never know, Tuesday morning, something could happen here. But I was interested to see if that loss to the Philadelphia Eagles wound up being what cost him his head coaching job, I should say. That's one of those things that was kind of in the back of my mind going into this game here, and just like the irony of, imagine, being the guy that lost his job with the Eagles and then ultimately lost another job, same head coaching idea, to the Eagles again. It would be poetry at its finest in the NFL. We'll see what happens here, but tough day for the Jaguars. I mean, the offense, 52 yards rushing, did not look good. Trevor Lawrence had very much up and down day, ran in a couple of scores, threw a couple of interceptions. The defense allowed over nearly 450 yards of total offense. 237 on the ground was the really big issue there. Just not a lot of good coming out of Jacksonville at this moment. Now, moving into the struggle bus category, those teams that are maybe a little too good, and won't be picking number one, but they're probably picking somewhere in, the top 10, maybe 11, 12, 13, something along those lines there. At number 26, we're looking at the Cleveland Browns. At 25, I have the Jets. 24 is the Giants, New York teams back-to-back right there. The Dolphins at 23, Cowboys at 22, and then the Colts rounding out the group at 4 and 5, sitting at number 21. So the Browns at 2 and 7, we got the real reality of Jameis Winston here. And honestly, maybe threw an interception or two he should have thrown last week and made up for it this week here with the 3 picks that he had here. This is what we're going to see from Cleveland for the remainder of the season here. Last week was insanity, don't get me wrong, and division rivalry games, especially in the AFC North, tend to get like that, and which is a big reason why I tried my best not to overreact to that Ravens loss. It's just one of those things where the AFC North, everyone plays each other with like a level of just ferocity that you don't really get in every other division, and it feels like anyone can really win those games, no matter who is the biggest, who the favorite is and how wide of a margin they are favored in. But the Browns, where they currently stand with Jameis Winston, I think this is more true to what we're going to see. I do want to shout out wide receiver Cedric Tillman because he is kind of on a tear right now. Since they traded Amari Cooper, he's looked really good. So he has been one of the smaller bright spots since the movement of him. He had another 6 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown this week, but he's been seeing a lot of attention the last few weeks here. But the Browns are just in an unfortunate place, and you can thank the owners for that, obviously the Haslams, and it's unfortunate because you have a really good defense on the other side of the football that is basically just going to get wasted on this hellhole of a season that you're currently sitting in, Cleveland. So I'm sorry to the fans, but this is kind of what happens when you make choices like giving Deshaun Watson $235 million guaranteed. The Jets at number 25. Gritty win, I guess you could say. Kind of an ugly win, but a gritty win over a Houston Texans team that I think a lot of people really liked coming into that game, even if you did not have either Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs here. A gritty win, though. Ugly win. Malachi Corley, not really sure why, and this is something we've seen a handful of times in the history of the NFL, why players are so eager to let go of the football when they are scoring touchdowns. Hang on to the football. It's not the first time we've seen that. It's not going to be the last time we see it. I don't know why people are so quick to let go of the football. You've got to hang on to it. That is like rule number 1 in football is do not let go of the football if you have the football. So hang on to it, Corley. Hopefully you'll get that touchdown sooner or later. Aaron Rodgers throws 3 interceptions. Garrett Wilson has the circus catch of the season and ultimately has a strong case now for best catch of the season. But funny enough, we got another contender for that later on in the week. But I will say it feels like maybe the Jets have found something on offense here, and it was against a Houston Texans team that's pretty good. It wasn't pretty, and they really picked up steam in the second half, but if what we saw in the second half is more along the lines of what this Jets offense could be with Devontae Adams, with Garrett Wilson, I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Defense, 8 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, which is a ridiculous total of both sacks and tackles for loss in a single game here. Made C.J. Stroud look a little bit mortal than he has in his young career so far. Only a handful of teams have really made him look worse, and the list is not very long here, but really good performance on the defensive side of things. Offense was a little bit sloppy, but a big win and a must-win situation for the Jets. Giants at 2 and 7, sitting at 24 here. I will give them some credit for fighting to the finish with Washington, but I will say that final score reads a little bit closer than I think the game actually was. Washington did kind of let the Giants crawl back into it late in that game there, but I do give credit for the Giants fighting to the very finish. Malik Neighbors is obviously the heartbeat of that offense is kind of like the way I'm looking at it right now. If he's not in there, it's tough going for them. Tyrone Tracy, the running back, continues to make me a believer in what he's doing over there in the absence of Devin Singletary. I really want to see him keep getting the opportunities because he's one, like, I love those stories of just unknown running backs who kind of explode onto the scene, and that kind of feels like what Tyrone Tracy's doing in a situation that's not really great right now. So for him to be doing what he has been doing, all the more exciting and impressive. And then Daniel Jones, he has this happen to him. It feels like every few games where he has that, like, not quiet the doubters, but like maybe hush them up for like a week or so. And those people that for whatever reason are still riding with Daniel Jones can go, look, see, he can do this. He had one of those games again, no turnovers, couple of touchdowns to go with the whole thing. But again, I'm off. I've been way off the Daniel Jones train for quite some time. I'm not buying that good game, if you want to call it that. And it is what it is. It just, numbers wise, those games tend to happen for Daniel Jones, and then people can point to the box score and be like, hey, look at that game. See, not so bad, that Daniel Jones guy. But I would have to disagree. My last thing about the Giants, because I saw some trade rumors surfacing over the last couple of days, do not trade Azeez Ojulari. Do not. I really like the group of pass rushers you have over there in New York. Do not. You lead the league in sacks right now, sitting at 35. He is a piece of that. Don't get rid of him. You want him, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau to be doing damage together as a group when they're healthy. Don't get rid of Ojulari. The Dolphins at 23, much better showing in round number 2 against Buffalo here. Mostert and Achane rattling up nearly 120 yards on the evening to a couple of touchdowns, no interceptions. Again, all around, far better performance offensively than the first time they played back in Miami when Tua ended up getting concussed in that game. The issues really are just the defense, and that's kind of been a problem for a good portion of the season here, is the defense is just not nearly consistent enough. They do let teams get behind them. They let teams score. You had a strong first half, but then 24 points in the second half ultimately cost you the football game. They really did look good in that first half too, but ultimately the issues just continue to crop up. There is some stuff that needs to be worked on over there, and we'll see what happens. I'm curious if maybe Miami tries to make a move before the trade deadline today to maybe shore up the defense a little bit, but as of right now, sitting at 2-6, the Dolphins are in a really weird place because they're like, you technically still have a shot at making the playoffs right now, but you're in such it's a long climb, and it's hard to justify making moves that are like a buy-in for the season when your record is sitting at 2-6 at basically the midpoint of the season. Cowboys at 3-5. Dak's apparently going to miss weeks. Emphasis on the weeks there, plural. Zeke obviously missed the game due to disciplinary issues. CeeDee Lamb could be out next week with his injury. You really got to hope that Micah Parsons coming back this week ends up being like a lifesaver on the defensive side of things, because the Cowboys season is spiraling right now. This is not the season I think anyone in Dallas expected or was hoping for, or any of the above. They are in a really tough way in Dallas right now, and I don't want to rub the salt into the wounds or anything like that. This is Jerry Jones has got to figure it out, and at this point, if you're a Cowboys fan, you've got to be vocal about it, because I know Jerry Jones is going around saying he's the best MFer to do this job and whatnot, but at this point right now, with what we saw from this team this past offseason, where they're supposedly going all in on the season, and all they did was basically sign Dak and CeeDee to massive contracts, and they couldn't afford Derrick Henry, as he's now literally going to lead the league in rushing and touchdowns and attempts and get the Triple Crown again. Got to be questioning some of that decision making. He's never going to let it go. I get it, but I would just, if you're a Cowboys fan, be vocal about your displeasure. That's the best I can say. Colts sitting at 21 to round out the group here at 4-5. 2 rookie offensive linemen getting a lot of action in this game here, and it definitely showed against the Minnesota Vikings defensive front. That will let you know just how good they are if you give them the opportunity. I mean, Jonathan Taylor racked up 48 yards on the night. Joe Flacco never really looked super comfortable in the pocket. And it's just overall not a great performance offensively for the Colts. Nothing was going right. Missed field goals as well were more of an issue. And it's unfortunate because you got a pretty good effort from the defense in this game here. You held down a Minnesota Vikings offense that, at certain points during the season is good for 20 some odd points or more, not like scraping and clawing to get to the 21 like they did in this game against you. But I mean, the D-line especially showing up big. Buckner, Grover Stewart racked up a couple of sacks. Kwity Paye got in there for one as well. Just the Colts are in a bad way right now. And at this point, maybe you can ask yourself, is the issue more than just Anthony Richardson? I'm not quite sure. But I don't know if he's the solution, and so that's not a great place to be in either. But something has got to be sorted out in Indianapolis right now, because between the issues we've seen with the offense with both Richardson and now even Joe Flacco, and again, Vikings defense pretty good, you would have hoped for a little bit of a better performance, though, because Joe Flacco has had some good games, and this was not the type of performance I was expecting out of this offense going in this game. I thought they could get up a little bit more on Minnesota, but just not a great game overall, and I'm starting to worry about the team as a whole. Moving into the Jeff Fisher category, everyone's favorite category here. The team's hovering around 500, maybe just outside looking in on the playoffs here. At number 20, at 4-5, we're looking at the Cincinnati Bengals. At number 19, we have the Chicago Bears. At 18, the Bucks. At 17, the Seahawks. At 16, the Rams. And at number 15, we're looking at the Arizona Cardinals. So the Bengals at 4-5. Joe Burrow, obviously, 5 touchdown passes, looked awesome in this game against the Raiders here, but it was running back Chase Brown that really stood out to me. 120 yards, 4.4 yards per attempt. And then how about Mike Gesicki going for 100 yards and a couple of scores as well? And then on top of that, probably one of the better performances you've got from your defense this entire season so far here. You could argue, yeah, maybe they looked solid against the Patriots, and if there were a few bounces of the football that went your way, you end up winning that game here, but this was probably one of the more complete performances that you've gotten from this defense all season, and at least within the last month or so. So we'll take it. Good game to build off of. Looking forward to seeing what Cincinnati does going on from here, because they have a short week, and on top of that, you're at 4-5, gotta win situations basically from here on out. You can't really afford to lose another football game for basically the duration of the season. You basically get one more loss, maybe two, and you want to try to avoid those and push them down the road as long as possible. So you are in we've got to win basically every single week now mode kind of deal from now till December at least. Bears sitting at 19. My biggest takeaway, and this is stemming even into last week as well, coming off of the bye, what the hell happened to the offense? Because the numbers are just it's like two different football teams. I thought, and I think a lot of people thought that Caleb Williams and the offense were really starting to figure themselves out. They were starting to roll, especially those last 3 games leading into the bye week. They'd put up 95 points in those 3 weeks. Coming out of the bye, you're looking at 26 points. You're averaging 13 points a game. You basically went from averaging what amounted to about 30, 1.5 points a game, down to 13 points a game from those 3 games leading into the bye to now the 2 games coming out of the bye. You can't run the football. Struggles, well, at least you couldn't run the football this past week. You looked pretty good doing it last week, but this past week couldn't run the football. The last couple of weeks struggles to throw the football or really get any rhythm going. What happened is basically the best way I can put it, because this looks nothing like what we saw heading into their bye week and just how good the Bears felt going into it. Bucks at number 18, big credit for them to hang on all the way into overtime here, but Mahomes getting the football last, especially in overtime, it feels like something that is inevitable at this point, that we have seen multiple times in Mahomes' career where he gets the football and he makes sure that you don't get it back. It is what it is. It's typically how that works. So losing the coin flip kind of ends up being the dagger there for you. Defense just kind of running out of gas ultimately here. And I feel for Tampa Bay because they're in such a tough spot right now where you have Baker Mayfield that's playing really well. Yeah, he's had a few games where he's maybe made a couple of too many turnovers, but for the most part has been worth every single penny that Tampa Bay has invested into him now as their franchise guy. And losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is just complicating a team that should be right in the thick of it for the NFC as a whole, and very much so in a straight up battle for the NFC South with the Falcons right now, but are going to just continue to kind of slip and fall to the wayside now because, your leading receiver in targets coming out of this game is Sterling Shepard, who I believe is 31, 32 years old now. I mean, you're in kind of a bad way. You got to rely on a guy like Cade Otton, who has been a good tight end to this point here, but I don't know if he's really reached that level yet as a tight end. And, a ground game that if you're not getting absolutely everything out of them, you're having a hard time controlling the football game. You're having a hard time milking the clock if you get the lead. Like, the Buccaneers are just in such a tough way right now. And hopefully when Mike Evans gets back, things get better and they can get back on track. But I think it's going to be a struggle. But, I mean, they're still competitive. So it's like you have to wonder, man, where would this team be if you had Mike Evans still and if you didn't lose Chris Godwin? Like, there's a good chance Tampa Bay's coming out of this game winners rather than losers, Seahawks at number 17. O-line was definitely not prepared for this Rams defensive front. With 7 sacks allowed, you also averaged just 3.3 yards per attempt rushing the football as well. Geno Smith was under a ton of pressure in this game. He threw 3 picks and all of that mess there. I mean, it was close. Obviously, you get into overtime, and I mean, you had Jackson Smith and Jigba is crazy. That guy was going off through the entirety of that game. And for him to, catch that game-tying score that put you in position to potentially steal this football game away. There are 3 different games now walking away from week number 9 of this season where you have to wonder why teams don't opt to go for the win and go for 2, because every single team, if I'm remembering this correctly, the Seahawks scored last, the Patriots scored last, and this is in regulation, and the Buccaneers scored last. To send everything to overtime, none of those teams went for 2 to try to just take the victory, and all 3 of them lost. To my point, maybe go for 2. I get, maybe you don't want to look into, and I'm not talking analytics. I'm just talking like you get yourself in a situation where, it's been tough. Seahawks, not necessarily the easiest path to victory or path to even tying up that football game against the Rams, all things considered. Maybe just go for 2 and try to win the football game rather than going into a situation of overtime where things have already been a struggle. Just go for the win. Just go for the win. I'm pretty sure that's 3 different examples of going into overtime and losing because you didn't just go for 2. Rams at number 16, right above them. Cannot forget the Rams here. Puka should not have been ejected. I think that was kind of crazy. BS, if you ask me. But Matthew Stafford is that dude. If you guys know me, big Matthew Stafford guy. Have always been a big Matthew Stafford guy since his very first snap in the NFL. Is that dude. Demarcus Robinson, couple of touchdowns. Obviously the game winner in overtime. Cooper Kupp looked good in the game as well. A big reason why guys like Demarcus Robinson wind up finding themselves open and catching things like game winners is because obviously even without Puka, you still have a guy like Cooper Kupp who's going to eat up a ton of attention here. But the big highlight for me, and we talked about this last week, and I've got to reiterate it again this week, just that defensive front, especially going after the quarterback. 29 pressures in this game total. Granted, there was a lot of throwing from Geno Smith's end, but 29 pressures in 7 sacks, led by that young trio of guys in Byron Young, Braden Fisk, and Jared Verse. They have something special brewing over there in LA. And if they really did hit on Fisk and Verse, it's very hard to replace a really good player in the NFL. You're not replacing a guy like Aaron Donald, but you're probably not feeling too bad right now considering the production you're getting out of Verse and Fisk out of this draft here. And Byron Young is really coming into his own as well. You've got something special brewing on that defensive front over there in LA, and it's not a moment too soon because the Rams now, with Puka and Kupp back in the fold, this team's offense has come to life. Things are opening up for Kyron Williams again. Everything, like there's a perfect storm. In the NFC West, wide open. Plenty of opportunity here for the Rams right now, and I'm excited to see. But they've got to get over the team that is currently first place in the NFC West, but not the highest rated NFC West team in my rankings here. the Arizona Cardinals. First place in the NFC West. As I've sat here and talked about them being one of the most talent-depleted rosters in the NFL, they are somehow leading the NFC West at 5-4. Their O-line wins every single week up front, it feels like, as James Conner continues to just bulldoze through defenses week in and week out, averaging 5.3 yards per attempt right now. And obviously some of that has to do with Kyler Murray's running as well and just the difficulties he creates with his legs. But this team averaging 5.3 yards per attempt right now, which is second best in the league. And they also have the second most runs over 10 yards this season as well. Listen, I don't know where this Cardinals team is going to go. They keep pulling off these massive wins, and granted, Bears team in a tough spot right now, but they do have some really good wins prior to that through this season so far. Big one over the Rams where they demolished them. Granted, really hurt Rams team, but still, nonetheless. Big win over the 49ers. This is a Cardinals team that could potentially pull off a massive upset and heist of this division here. And I'm really looking forward to what the back half of the season looks like for them, because I did not envision the Cardinals at 5-4. And never mind them leading the division at 5-4 as well. So curious to see where they go right now. But they are not my best team in terms of power rankings in the NFC West. Moving into the playoff hopefuls now. Remember, as always, I love to explain this here because some people do not listen. You have to have 7 AFC. You have to have 7 NFC. There has to be a division winner. And then obviously the remaining wild card teams. Sitting at number 14... we're looking at the Denver Broncos. At number 13 is the 49ers. At number 12, the Chargers. At 11, the Falcons. Steelers are at 10. Didn't play this week, obviously. Texans at 9. Packers at 8. And then the Commanders at number 7. So, Broncos at 5-4. 41-10 blowout loss. This was a reminder that what Denver is doing right now is very much overachieving. In every sense of the word. Like, they are playing with house money, and then they're playing with house money, and then they kept playing with the house money and kept winning, and then this was kind of like the house taking a lot of the money back. That's basically how I look at Denver right now. I'm still a big fan of what Denver's doing right now, the things that they've got brewing. Defensive front is one of my favorite in the leagues right now, even minus Baron Browning now. And shout out to Jonathan Cooper for getting the contract that he did, because he absolutely deserves that and maybe even more. Bo Nix, still a gamer, still a guy that I'm really high on, and I've been really impressed with what he's doing, and is someone I'm rooting for just because of the sole fact that he gets so much hate for the time that he spent while he was in college, which isn't necessarily his fault. He just took advantage of it. But at the end of the day, Denver is trending in the right direction. They're still 5-4. They're still very much a playoff team at this point right now. They are the number 7 seed, because the other two teams behind them are sitting at 4-5 in the Bengals and Colts, and we don't know where those teams are going to go at this point right now. So I like what Denver's doing. I like them as the bottom of the playoff teams in the AFC, hence why at 14. 49ers didn't play this week, but they did move up a spot. Successful bye week for them, so tipping your cap to them. That just had to do with teams falling below them. Chargers sitting at number 12. This was exactly the type of performance I would have expected from the Chargers if they were able to basically roll over the Cleveland Browns. I thought the game would be a little bit more gritty, a little bit more run-focused, but Cleveland really started to kind of fold over, and the mistakes that you were getting from Jameis Winston with all the interceptions kind of led to this here. J.K. Dobbins looked good on the ground in the limited attempts that he took, which wasn't a ton, but 6.1 yards per attempt and a couple of scores. Offensive line definitely had some trouble, but the pass rush over there in Cleveland, it is what it is. You got some really talented dudes over there. I mean, Garrett, obviously, Myles Garrett's sitting over there, so it is what it is. It's bound to happen here, but maybe struggled a little bit more than you would have hoped, I guess you could say. Quentin Johnston deserves some love for the play that he had this week. He had 4 receptions for 118 yards and a score, and when I was going back and looking, based off what I saw, and I also cross-checked this with PFF as well, so take it for what you will, he got Martin Emerson, Juan Thornhill, and Denzel Ward on 20-plus catches, and obviously the 66-yard touchdown score was accredited to Denzel Ward in coverage. So, you know, for a guy that has gotten a lot of flack for maybe not producing nearly as much, considering where he was drafted for this Chargers team a few seasons ago, big game for him. We've seen some good stuff from Ladd McConkey as well. Maybe with a healthy Herbert and an offensive line that's finding its way, maybe we start to see some of these guys really start to flourish over the next few weeks of this season here, and it doesn't have to be so ground and pound heavy, and maybe this team can take a little more flight through the air. Falcons sitting at number 11 with Kirk Cousins tossing another 3 touchdowns. For all the love that like Kyle Pitts gets, Drake London, obviously, Bijan Robinson, the one guy that I feel like I'm seeing every single week pop out on the screen for me here is Darnell Mooney, a guy that kind of got chased out of Chicago because he had that one great season and then things kind of fell off from there. But there is a legit connection between he and Kirk Cousins right now. He's currently sitting on a career high in touchdowns with 5, and we're only halfway through the season. And when you look at the numbers and where he is at in terms of receptions, targets, and yardage, there is a good possibility that he beats all of those numbers. So keep an eye on Mooney and Cousins. They've got something special brewing there. Like, obviously, there's a bunch of big names that take away all the attention, but Mooney's quietly having a extremely productive season right now as technically like the 3rd receiving option, and even maybe the 4th if you want to count Bijan Robinson ahead of him. Steelers obviously did not... and also, before we jump off there, Falcons, defensive front, some good pressure in the pass rush. 18 pressures total is what I got for a number. 3 sacks on top of that. Probably the best performance they've had all season. Let's build on that. Steelers obviously did not play a game this week, but they are sitting at number 10 here. They actually technically slipped down a spot, and this was just because I did what I think was a little bit of an overcorrection on a team, and we'll get to the overcorrection when we get there, but this really has less to do with the Steelers and just more so with me assorting some teams around them, and they slipped a spot. Texans at number 9, sloppy. Offensively, that is. Defense did a pretty good job of keeping the Jets in check for a vast majority of that football game, but it got to the point where the offense was just so stuck in the mud. Your defense is bound to give things up and start to break eventually, and I feel like that's kind of what the end result was there. And the Jets kind of, doing some good things that we haven't really seen from them so far this season here. But O-line struggled big time in pass protection here. Joe Mixon had a really good game. CJ Stroud, 11 of 31. Like I said, pretty mortal game. 191 yards, and 82 of those yards came off of literally 2 completions. You had 21 points allowed in the second half, like I'd mentioned earlier. Just not a great game for the Texans right now, and falling out of the Super Bowl contenders for the first time in a handful of weeks. Packers at number 8. They also falling out of the Super Bowl contenders category here, sitting at 6-3. Inability to finish drives really killing this team. Settling for 3 multiple times. You failed to get points before the end of the first half. You had the turnover downs late in the football game, and you absolutely needed to get points on the board. You needed a touchdown, not just a field goal. You needed a touchdown there, but couldn't get the job done there. Obviously, the Jordan Love pick 6 killed one of the drives as well and led to points going the other way. Just a lot of offensive issues and inability to finish and just shooting yourself in the foot type of situations. And it wasn't a terrible performance by the defense, and obviously weather was a little bit crazy in this game as well, but I mean, your defense only let up 17 points throughout the entirety of that football contest there, but not a great game for Green Bay. I still believe in this football team, though. I still think they're one of the better teams in the NFC. They have one of the more exciting young wide receiver rooms. Josh Jacobs continues to do his thing and looks really good on the ground here, but this was just like one of those really ugly performances where Green Bay came in and I don't want to say didn't seem ready for the game, but it kind of looked like they just were not ready for what the Lions were bringing to them. And this is a game where I believe Brian Branch also got ejected, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Brian Branch that got ejected from this game too? A couple of ejections this week. We had Puka Nacua, and I believe Brian Branch was the other one. So a lot of weird things going on this past weekend in that area of things. And then at number 7, to round out the group, the Washington Commanders, sitting at 7-2. As I've been saying, basically for the last 3 weeks now, the only reason they're not in the Super Bowl contenders category is because I need that signature win. I really flirted with throwing them in there anyways, just because of the state of the rest of the NFC right now, and they just continue to win football games. They have won 7 of their last 8 games, and that loss was to a Ravens team where you only went down by 7, and the first loss was week 1 of the season, Jaden Daniels' first start of the year. You have a tough, 37-20 loss, I believe was what the score was, or something like that, against Tampa Bay. So, listen, Daniels is Offensive Rookie of the Year material. At this point, he's like Offensive Player of the Year and maybe even MVP candidate conversation of the year type deal. Like, there's some guys I'd give the award to over, but I don't really think it's that crazy if you want to sit there and argue that Jaden Daniels is maybe deserving of being in the conversation. Like, I don't think that's a crazy conversation to have with the way that he has played and how effective he has been. I don't really care if anyone wants to sit there and say that Cliff Kingsbury is drawing up a college system for him. That's what your offensive coordinator should be doing, designing an offense around your strengths and maximizing your talents. And they've been doing that through the first 9 games that they've played right now. There's a reason they're sitting at 7-2, and it's not because they're not doing those things right. They're doing those things correctly. So knock them all you want. It's working. Defense did scare me a little bit, as Daniel Jones again had one of those sneaky, okay games. But overall, in a game where, you didn't have Brian Robinson, you have Chris Rodriguez Jr. stepping in for you at running back. He leads the group, he and Austin Eckler, racking up, I believe, over 100 yards or maybe just under. I forgot to write the number down, but overall, a really solid performance. You're going up against a division rival that has a pretty good pass rush. They lead the league in sacks right now. You come out of that game not looking too bad. And again, if I can just get that signature win from the Commanders, I have to look at the schedule and see who they have coming up. But honestly, if the Commanders win one more game, I might just have to throw them in the category anyways. And I honestly kind of feel wrong for not having them in there this week. I was like this close, but I didn't want to go back on my word. But even as I'm sitting here talking about it, I really feel like I should have just put them in there anyways. Because again, winners of 7 of their last 8. And that loss was a 7-point loss to a Ravens team that looks really good right now. How can you not at least consider them at this point right now with the way the rest of the NFC is shaping up at this point here? Like, they're tied for wins in the NFC right now because the Vikings and Eagles are both sitting at 6-2 if my numbers over here are correct. But at that point, you're second to the Lions, and that's only because they have 1 game less played and 1 loss less than you. But Commanders are looking really good right now. I feel I should have put them in the Super Bowl contenders category. And then to wrap it up, of course, the top group here. And please stay with me till the very end here because we have got a conversation to have about number 2 and number 1. Coming in at number 6, we're looking at the Minnesota Vikings. At number 5, the Eagles. At number 4, the Bills. 3, the Ravens. And for those of you listening and maybe not watching, at number 2, the Lions are still staying put. And at number 1, the undefeated 8-0 Kansas City Chiefs continue their reign of terror amongst the rankings here. We'll get to them in a second. The Vikings sitting at number 6, I dropped them even with this win over the Colts here. During the losing streak, and even now, going into this game here, or coming out of this game, I guess I should say, the Sam Darnold experience is a wild one. 3 touchdowns, but also 3 turnovers. Justin Jefferson kind of bailed you out in this game here because he is wide receiver 1 of the NFL. And, when things are going wrong and the pressure is there and it's not necessarily looking too great for you in the pocket, you can heave it to Justin Jefferson, and he's going to catch the football. And that's it. I don't want to say that Sam Darnold is having the season he's having because of Justin Jefferson, but I don't want to say that that's a coincidence either. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of really good options around Sam Darnold right now, and he's clearly showing he does have some talent still working with him, and, he's flashing what people saw of him coming out of USC. But again, that Sam Darnold experience is very real right now. The defense continues to be ferocious, especially that defensive front, completely locking down Jonathan Taylor. A lot of people asking me, because again, Colts fan here and where I work, a lot of people asking me my thoughts on this game and what I think Jonathan Taylor could do against them. And honestly, we got what I kind of expected, especially with the injuries to the O-line of the Colts and who was going to be starting for them in this game here. Was not really too surprised at the outcome of that, but Vikings defense looks really good right now. They continue to do what they do best, and that is just create problems for quarterbacks to try to figure out. The exotic blitzing is so fun to watch because you never really know who's coming after the quarterback. You can have what feels like 7 guys right up on the line of scrimmage, and you wind up with only 3 or 4 rushers. And it's one of the crazier things to watch, and I'm really enjoying it. Eagles at number 5. This is a big correction here, and I hinted to this when we were talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They took a massive jump here, sitting at 6-2 now. Saquon Barkley making Eagles history now with, I believe, now racking up like 440-something yards over his last 3 games on the ground for the Eagles, most in a 3-game span for them here. Averaging 5.9 yards per attempt in this game, racking up about 160 yards with a score. Obviously, that backwards leapfrog, I guess I should add, that we saw from him, like Saquon Barkley behind this offensive line having this type of season makes so much sense, and it's really not that surprising. I think the real question was just, is he going to be able to stay healthy? And he has been able to. And with how good the O-line is over there in Philadelphia, it doesn't surprise me that this is the end result that we're getting here. Devontae Smith rivaling Garrett Wilson for catch of the year. The fact that we got both these catches in the same week is really crazy, but I'm curious to see what everyone here might think. If you're watching and you get to this and you hear me ask this, let me know in the comments. Devontae Smith or Garrett Wilson, who gets catch of the year in your opinion there? Because both of them were pretty freaking wild. And then the defense, of course, as I mentioned, looking really good this week, allowing just 52 yards on the ground. We were talking about the Jaguars earlier. He had a couple of interceptions off of Trevor Lawrence. Altogether, 9 pass breakups through the whole defense. This and winning the battle up front is the big thing here. Like, you're getting a lot out of those Georgia guys up front there. So right now, Philadelphia, there was a point in time 4 games ago where people were talking, Nick Sirianni and getting fired. Have not really heard a single whisper about that in about 3 weeks now. So things are looking peachy keen over in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and I'm happy to see that the Eagles are back on track because, as I've been saying, basically going into the end of last season, way too much talent for this team to not be succeeding. Bills at number 4 with Josh Allen working through his MVP campaign. Very much an MVP type of effort. And honestly, if you wanted to give the award to Josh Allen, I totally get it. He is one of those guys that I think is well in the running for it. If it's not him, it's maybe someone like Jared Goff. But Josh Allen definitely has a case here. Great teams find ways to win. And in a game where you're letting a team like the Miami Dolphins, who have been in a bad way, but now that they have Tua back, seem to be finding their footing again. But this is a team you crushed the first time around, and it's always difficult to beat a team twice in a season, but the Bills got it done here. Great teams find ways to win, and they did just that in this game here. That Bass field goal for 61 yards was awesome, but right now, Bills feel really good. I feel like they can take it to just about anyone. Yeah, they have that really ugly loss to Baltimore on like under their belt, but beyond that, I have a really hard time picking against Buffalo. They are absolutely rolling right now, and they can just get it done every which way they need to. Defensive concerns are probably one of the few things that I think about with them just because of the amount of injuries that they've dealt with and the amount of turnover they had this offseason as well. Like, I'm having a hard time getting a read on what this defense actually is right now, but the offensive side of things makes me feel really comfortable about them, especially in today's day and age in the NFL. Ravens at number 3, perfect passer rating. I believe number 4 for Lamar Jackson. For all of you Lamar is a running back haters and doubters, every single time this happens, it's one of those things where I smile because Lamar is as good as they come. You have another 100 yards and a couple of scores for Derrick Henry. Your defense essentially swallowed the Denver Broncos offense for lunch during that 1 o'clock matinee. And the big name I want to shout out here, because he took over for Patrick Queen this season, and this kind of felt like the potential breakout game for him where he really announced his presence, was linebacker Trenton Simpson. The guy that they opted to let Patrick Queen walk for had a really big game for him. The Ravens are rolling right now, like rocking and rolling. And yeah, they have some tough losses on their resume this season. Again, the Raiders won, leaves you scratching your head. Last week, division rival to the Browns. Like, you shouldn't have lost that game. They should have won that game. You should be sitting at 7-2 at the very least right now. And then, of course, you have a toenail of a loss to the Chiefs. The Ravens are as good as they come in the NFL right now. There's not a whole lot of teams I would take above them, and that's why I have them sitting at number 3 right now, because I feel pretty good picking the Ravens each and every single week. And honestly, aside from them losing, I guess their losses to the Raiders and the Browns, from where I stand, they should not have lost either of those games. Like, this is a team that should firmly be sitting somewhere along the lines of, like, 8-1, something like that, 7-1, whatever the record is supposed to be if they have 2 less losses on their record. They should not be sitting at 6-3 right now, and they are, no excuse, but this is a team that's better than their record. And then number 2 and number 1, because I'm sure I'm going to get comments about this, and, I'm going to get called a Chiefs glazer and whatever you want to say. The Lions defense, it's clutch. That 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 turnover on downs late in the game was awesome. Kirby Joseph pick 6 was money. Brian Branch getting ejected, obviously a big deal, but the defense still rallying despite that, even though Brian Branch is huge for that defense with just how much he can do. Listen, I get it. If you're a Lions fan and you think that your team is the best team in the NFL, I get it. Believe me, I do. What Jared Goff is doing right now, MVP type run. He's currently sitting on an 83.4% completion rate since week 3 against Arizona. You have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who are just the 1-2 punch that you could, like the perfect 1-2 punch I feel like you could ask for coming out of the backfield. You have one of the most badass offensive lines in the NFL. I get it. Believe me, I get it. But sitting at number 1 at the top of the mountain, you have Patrick Mahomes now, who threw for nearly 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a pretty ugly weather game against the Tampa Bay defense that, don't get me wrong, I'm well aware, has been pretty much a sand sieve defending the pass. They've not been great. But weather considered, you typically don't get super good numbers in that type of weather throwing the football. But again, nearly 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins in week 2 with the Chiefs now, as he continues to make strides in this offense and open things up for other people in the offense as well, had 86 yards and a couple of touchdowns, a couple of big touchdowns at that. And then Travis Kelce, who's benefiting now from the attention that DeAndre Hopkins is going to start drawing every single week more and more if he's playing like this. 14 receptions, 100 yards. You got another 100-yard game and a game-winning touchdown from Kareem Hunt. And the defense, far from perfect tonight, far from perfect, but has been great this season themselves and is a big reason why this team is sitting at 8-0. This team is missing Isaiah Pacheco, who should be coming back at some point soon. Juju Smith-Schuster, whenever he gets back into the fray, if he finds his way back in, could be another big piece for this offense to get in, because he was a important part of this offense until he went down. Someone like Charles Omenihu, who's been missing since the start of the season, when he gets back to add to this defense, this team isn't even in its final form right now. They're sitting at 8-0. They're winning football games, whether it's by the offense now or the defense. The DeAndre Hopkins effect is going to be real. We're already starting to see it. And on top of that, you have Patrick Mahomes, who's figuring it out now, and you have Andy Reid leading the way. If you don't think the Chiefs are number 1, and you think it's supposed to be the Lions, you think it's supposed to be the Ravens, you think it's supposed to be the Bills, maybe the Eagles, whoever you think it's supposed to be, listen, it's a lot easier to just say you're sick and tired of the Chiefs sitting at the top of the mountain. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm not a Chiefs glazer. I'm kind of sick of seeing the Chiefs win all the time. I can't even believe they're 8-0 right now. But they have been sitting on the top of the mountain for 2 years now. And at this point, if you don't think that they're at the top, again, just say you're tired of seeing them sit at the top of the mountain. It's a lot easier to say that than to try to make up some reason why they're not the top team in the NFL. I don't care what the numbers say. I'm not betting against Mahomes. I'm not betting against Andy Reid right now. I'm not betting against what this offense could potentially turn into with DeAndre Hopkins now. Steve Spagnuolo has 4 championship rings as a defensive coordinator for a reason. I can't bet against Kansas City. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Chiefs at number 1. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts, your opinions. Fire away. Let me know how wrong I am. I love discussing with you all. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.